A werewolf saved my life. As a kid, I grew up hearing stories about werewolves from my grandmother. She told me they were evil demons that turned good people into monsters every full moon. But there was one werewolf who had never hurt a fly in his life. He lived deep in the woods, and he protected all of the animals. My grandmother always said to stay away from him because she didn't trust werewolves. But I was curious, and I wanted to see what a real werewolf looked like. So when I was 12 years old, I went into the forest to find the friendly werewolf. I walked for hours without seeing anything or anyone. I started to get scared and thought I should go back home. Then I heard a twig snap behind me. I turned around and saw the scariest-looking monster with fur all over its body, sharp teeth and claws, and glowing red eyes. It was a werewolf. I started screaming and running away, but it was too fast and caught up with me in seconds. I fell on the ground, and it stood over me growling. I closed my eyes waiting to be torn apart, but nothing happened. I opened my eyes, and the werewolf was gone. I ran as fast as I could back to my grandmother's house. I told her everything that had happened, and she just shook her head and said I had made it all up. She didn't believe me. So I went to the police and told them about the scary werewolf. They thought it was hilarious that I believed in werewolves and didn't take me seriously. I was so upset that no one believed me that I ran away from home. I didn't want to be alive anymore. I climbed up a hill and was going to throw myself off when suddenly a pair of hands grabbed me and pulled me back. It was the werewolf. It looked at me with its glowing red eyes and asked if I was okay. I nodded, and it carried me down the hill and brought me to a small cottage in the woods. It laid me down on a bed and started to take care of my wounds. It was so sweet and caring that I instantly felt better. The werewolf then disappeared and came back with some food and water. I ate and drank, and then asked where it lived. The werewolf said that it lived deep in the woods, and that this was just a cabin that it used sometimes. I asked why it had saved me, and the werewolf said it didn't want another innocent life to be lost. It then disappeared again, this time coming back with a warm blanket for me to sleep under. I was so grateful for the werewolf's kindness that I didn't feel like ending my life anymore. The next morning, the werewolf woke me up and told me it was time for me to go home. I hugged the werewolf goodbye and headed back to my grandmother's house. I was sad to leave the friendly werewolf behind, but I was also happy that it had saved my life. When I got home, my grandmother and the whole town were searching for me everywhere. They were so relieved to see that I was alive and well. I told them about the kind werewolf that had saved me, and they all looked at me like I was crazy. No one believed me except for my grandmother. She apologized for not believing me and told me that she was proud of the young man I had become. From that day on, I visited the werewolf in the woods whenever I could. We would talk for hours, and it always made me feel better. It was the best friend I had ever had. And even though no one else could see it, I knew that the friendly werewolf was real. One day, I went to visit the werewolf, but it wasn't in its cabin. I looked everywhere for it, but I couldn't find it anywhere. I was so worried that something had happened to it that I called the police and told them to search the woods. But they didn't take me seriously and just laughed in my face. I was so upset that I ran away from home and went to live in the woods. I built myself a small hut and tried to live off the land, but I couldn't stop thinking about the werewolf. I missed it so much that I started to become ill. One night, I was lying in my hut, and the wind was howling outside. I was so cold that I started to shiver. Suddenly, I heard a knock on my door. I got up and opened it, and there stood the werewolf. It was hurt and bleeding, and it looked like it had been in a fight. I helped the werewolf inside and took care of its wounds. As the days passed, the werewolf became weaker and weaker. It was clear that it wouldn't make it. Before it died, it told me that it had been attacked by other werewolves that didn't like that it befriended humans. It said that they had beaten it up and left it for dead. I was so sad to hear this, and I did everything I could to help, but it was too late. The werewolf died in front of me and turned into a handsome man. I was shocked and scared, but also curious. I asked if he was a demon, and he smiled and said no. He was a werewolf, just like his father before him. He told me that his name was Lucien, and that he had been cursed by an evil witch to turn into a monster every full moon. That's when I understood that werewolves weren't demons, but rather good people who were cursed to become beasts. I felt so sorry for Lucien and promised to help break the curse. I searched for the evil witch, but she had disappeared. I was so upset that I didn't know how to break the curse that I threw myself to the ground and cried. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the forest and told me that it knew how to break the curse. I stood up and followed the voice until I came to a clearing. In the middle of the clearing was a pentagram, and standing inside of it was a beautiful woman. She told me that she was the spirit of the forest and that she knew how to break the curse. But it would take a lot of power from me. I didn't hesitate and agreed immediately. I stepped into the pentagram, and the spirit of the forest began the ritual. The ritual was long and painful, and I felt like I was being torn apart. But I pushed through the pain because I wanted to help Lucien. Finally, the spirit of the forest told me it was done, and that I had to give her my most precious possession to complete the ritual. I thought about my friendship with Lucien and realized that I couldn't live without him. So I gave her a lock of my hair. The moment I did, I felt a surge of power and the world around me started to spin. I fell to my knees, and the last thing I remember is seeing Lucien standing over me with a worried expression on his face. When I woke up, I was lying next to Lucien in the forest. I sat up and noticed that I had no memories of the previous night. I looked at Lucien and asked what had happened. He told me that I had passed out during the ritual, and he had carried me here. He also told me that the spirit of the forest had broken the curse, and that I would now be able to turn into a werewolf whenever I wanted to. I was so happy to hear this, and thanked Lucien for everything he had done for me. We spent the day together in the forest, and then we went our separate ways. From that day on, I could control my transformations, and I never turned into a monster accidentally again. I also learned that there are good and evil werewolves, just like there are good and evil humans. And I am grateful that I had the chance to be a werewolf and experience life as a monster. If you enjoyed this story, please leave a like and subscribe for more content. Also, be sure to check out the author's page for more great stories. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.